When I look back on the moments that changed my life, I never would have guessed one of them would happen in the middle of chopping onions at my kitchen counter. Life has a funny way of surprising us at the exact time we think everything is ordinary. That evening, I was standing over the stove, stirring a pot of tomato sauce and humming along to the radio when my stepson, Ethan, walked into the kitchen with a question that would shake me to my core and yet fill me with more love than I ever thought I could carry. I married my husband, David, 3 years ago. At that time, Ethan was only 8, a shy and thoughtful boy who had already lived through more than most kids his age. His mother, Rachel, passed away when he was 5, and since then, David had been doing everything he could to raise Ethan with love and stability. When I met them, I was nervous about stepping into a role that felt so delicate. I didn't want to take anyone's place or pretend to erase memories of Rachel, but I did want to give my heart fully to the family I was joining. At first, Ethan was polite but distant with me. He would say please and thank you, but he kept a quiet wall between us. I understood his world had already been shaken, and then here I was, someone new, someone who might feel like another change he didn't ask for.
So I took my time.
I showed up at every school play, every soccer game, and every science fair. I made sure his favorite cereal was always in the cupboard, and that I learned how to make his peanut butter and jelly sandwiches just the way he liked them, with the peanut butter spread all the way to the corners of the bread. Slowly, I saw cracks forming in that wall, and little by little, Ethan began to let me in. By the time that evening came around, he was 11. He had grown taller, his hair always falling in his eyes no matter how often I trimmed it, and he had a smile that could light up the darkest room when he let it out. That night, the house smelled of garlic and basil, and I was just thinking about calling Ethan and David to the table when I heard small footsteps padding into the kitchen. "Hey, kiddo," I said, wiping my hands on a towel. "Dinner's almost ready. Can you set the table?" But instead of grabbing the silverware like he usually did, Ethan stood by the doorway, shifting from one foot to the other. His eyes looked serious, more serious than I had ever seen on him before. "Can I ask you something?" he said softly. "Of course," I replied, giving him my full attention. I turned down the stove and faced him, sensing this wasn't just about homework or soccer practice. He hesitated for a moment, then finally blurted out, "Will you be my mom?" The words hung in the air like a firework exploding in slow motion. My hands froze. My heart skipped. I felt tears springing up before I could stop them. Ethan's face turned red, and he quickly added, "I mean, I know you're not my real mom, but I want you to be. You already are, kind of. And I just want to call you Mom." I dropped the towel I was holding and rushed over to him, kneeling so I could look him right in the eye. "Ethan," I whispered, my voice trembling, "you have no idea what that means to me." His little shoulders relaxed, and his eyes filled with relief, as if he had been carrying this question inside him for months. I pulled him into a hug, and he clung to me so tightly that I thought my heart might burst. When David walked into the kitchen a moment later, confused by the sight of the two of us crying and holding each other, I looked up and said through tears, "Your son just asked me to be his mom." David's eyes softened, and in that instant, I saw tears forming in his too. He put his arms around us both, and for the first time, I felt like we weren't just a family built by circumstance. We were a family chosen by love. That moment was only the beginning. The weeks that followed were filled with conversations, gentle, tender talks about what it meant for Ethan to call me Mom. We spoke about Rachel, and I made sure Ethan knew he never had to erase his mother from his heart. I told him that love isn't limited, that it grows and expands, and that it's okay to love us both in different ways. Sometimes we'd sit on the porch swing after dinner, and he'd tell me stories he remembered about her. Her laugh, the way she sang to him at bedtime, the pancakes she used to make shaped like dinosaurs. I listened to every detail because those stories mattered, not just to him, but to me too. At school, Ethan started introducing me as his mom. The first time I heard him do it, we were at a parent-teacher conference. His teacher greeted us both, and Ethan said proudly, "This is my mom." The way he said it, with confidence and love, nearly made me cry right there in front of his teacher. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt when I worried if I was doing enough, or if I was honoring Rachel's memory properly. But every time Ethan reached for my hand, or ran into my arms after a soccer game, or left me little notes on the fridge that said, "I love you, Mom," I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. One particularly touching moment came the following Mother's Day. I hadn't expected much. Mother's Day had always felt complicated in our household because of the loss they'd experienced. But that morning, Ethan woke me up with breakfast in bed. It was a plate of scrambled eggs that were half burnt and a piece of toast slathered in way too much butter, but to me, it was the most beautiful breakfast I had ever seen. He handed me a card he made himself, with crooked letters and colorful doodles. Inside, it simply said, "Thank you for being my mom when you didn't have to be. I love you." I don't think I've ever cried as hard as I did holding that card. From that day forward, something shifted in me too. I no longer thought of myself as a stepmom trying to find her place. I was his mom, maybe not by birth, but by bond, by choice, by every late-night hug, and every tear wiped away. And Ethan? He gave me the gift of belonging, the kind that goes deeper than words can describe. Years later, when Ethan graduated high school, I stood in the crowd with David, cheering louder than anyone. When he walked across the stage to receive his diploma, he scanned the crowd until his eyes landed on me. He lifted the diploma high and mouthed the words, "Love you, Mom." I knew then that the question he asked me in the kitchen all those years ago had changed not just my life, but his too. And that's the truth of it. Sometimes the biggest changes come not with grand events or dramatic moments, but with a quiet question asked in a kitchen while dinner is cooking. "Will you be my mom?" was the question that I couldn't refuse, and saying yes was the best decision of my life.